Pete, we've gotten a ton of questions on outside workouts recently, and lots of them. And it makes sense because the weather is getting better, right?
It's the time.
It's the time indeed. So Pete, let's and Ivy and Alex, let's all talk about outside workouts for a bit. And how to do them, some tips. We get a lot of questions on people asking, like, I go outside and my power's all over the place. What's going on? Or do you have tips to make them easier? They're tougher, or whoa, I'm really able to do more. Lots of questions. So we're just going to go through a basic walkthrough here on how to do them within the context of TrainerRoad, and then how to do them in general in terms of principles. So first, with TrainerRoad, outside workouts exist for almost every workout that's on your calendar when you're following a plan. If it doesn't, then you should reach out to support and let them know, and then they will get that sorted for you quickly. But in almost every case, you should have them. The way that you actually do that is when you have a workout on your calendar, you just click on that workout, and there's a little button that says outside and inside and outside, and you just click on outside. And then at that point, if you've synced your Garmin account with TrainerRoad or your Wahoo, that sort of thing, it just automatically sends over to your head unit, and you turn on your head unit and everything just works. It's pretty cool. As long as your head unit has time to sync, by the way. So that's how you actually do them there. And there's two different ways you can do them. A lot of us don't have power meters on our bikes that we would ride outside. We might just have a smart trainer inside. So in that scenario, what we've done is each workout not only has power, like it's an outside power based workout, but we also created a written RPE based version of that, meaning that you have 1 to 10 rate of perceived exertion targets instead of power targets for those intervals if you don't have a power meter. That is actually a really good way to train for people that don't have a power meter outside. You can still get a huge amount of bang for your buck for doing that sort of thing. So if you don't have a power meter, you can still do it. Just below that toggle where you switch it to outside, there's another toggle where you can say power based or RPE based, and that's how you can do those. Let's talk about setting up the head unit first. Alex I don't comprehend how he does this, but he keeps his power on 1 second smoothing. Is that right, Alex? Like instant power? You just see the power?
Yeah, I'm a robot. So, I mean, I let my legs do the smoothing.
Oh, goodness gracious. That would blow my mind. I couldn't do it. The number would just constantly be bouncing everywhere. Alex somehow is able to like spreadsheet math a rolling average while he's looking at it.
That's exactly how I get through intervals. It's just like,
Alex is a
5-minute interval.
He's a smooth brain, and his brain smooths the power for him. Get it?
His brain is smoother. It makes sense.
Yes.
I smooth all of my outside power to 10 seconds actually outside. And I found that it makes it easier for when I'm trying to adhere to specific targets or within a range. But 5 second, 3 second, you have a ton of different options, and you can explore any and all in between that. But that's one of the things I do there for sure. Pete and Ivy, how about you? What sort of smoothing do you usually like on the power outside?
Pete does 5-minute smoothing.
Yeah, 16-minute smoothing. No, I like to correlate my lap power in 3 second or 5 second, depending on like the length of the interval. But I really like to have both because, one's where you're going and one's where you are. So I can kind of meter my efforts a little bit more. But again, I think we'll talk about it a little more later in our experiences, but I also try not to look down so much so that I'm not compensating for what I'm pedaling at this second. And then, it's really
constantly
about
chasing it.
Yeah. As the power drops, I'm like, all right, 500. And then it's like, oh no, take it off. And then 200.
200, 500,
Over
200,
under,
500, 200. Yeah.
That's all my workouts.
How about you, Ivy? What do you run?
Yeah, 3 seconds for me.
3 seconds.
And it took a while to get used to. I think that when I first started riding with a power meter, I should have had a little bit more generous of power smoothing. So that I wasn't chasing it all the time. But yeah, I think there's something to be said for not staring at the power meter and like learning what that effort feels like and then sitting in it instead of just, like fixating on how that number is changing and trying to match it.
I feel attacked.
But it's so true because, and let's just talk about that right now, that like safety first, right?
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, it's fine. But safety first, right? That's like so important. And if you are just staring at the numbers on a road with traffic, it's not safe. Don't do it. Don't let your power target put you in an unsafe position ever under any circumstance. Right. So there's that. and really, Chad has mentioned this so many times, but all data should just inform perception, right? So, and what you do is you use that data to constantly adjust your perception. So what I do, like when I start out my interval, I'll start out at what I feel like and I think is going to be that target, which by the way, over time, you'll like really surprise yourself and you'll be able to like, when it's 242 watts and that's the obscure target for that interval, and you'll start out and you're just like right at 242, you should pat yourself on the back. That feels pretty cool. So, but over time you'll get there. At first, it will feel really hard to figure it all out. But when you tie in that feeling to the actual power target, and then you just occasionally check in on that to make sure that you're still close, that's really the sweet spot that you want to be within. No pun intended there.
Absolutely.
I need to clarify for that terrible bad joke earlier, or dad joke. I need to clarify when it's not intentional. So
just
Alex, sorry.
Naturally.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I was going to ask, and I'll do a quick fire in the middle of this. Elapsed time or time remaining for interval? What does everybody run?
Yeah, so there's two different ways. Actually, Pete, let's just get into the Garmin head unit and Wahoo head unit setup discussion, because that addresses that very thing, Alex.
Yeah.
So I'll take on the Garmin one first, and then Pete, do you want to do Wahoo after that?
Let's do it.
Garmin is more capable, but more complex. So you can do more things with it, but there's also just some things to know. So for the Garmin Edge 1030, 830, and 530, there's certain data fields that you can use that are really helpful that you don't have on other head units, including watches. So for the 1030, 830, and 530, the fields, and we actually have a link to this in the description below. So go click on that if you want to see that and listen to us talk about it right now. But there's a link to a Help Center article called Creating a Custom Garmin Screen. And within that, we talk about the fields that we recommend building, because Garmin has their own workout screen, but it only shows you your average power for that interval. And then it shows you, has kind of like arrows that are kind of like sliders to show the range that you should stay within, and then a very zoomed in view of your interval. And that's all you get. And we probably want to see things differently, especially if you've trained with TrainerRoad, then you know of the value of having like this very basic, but focused and still capable setup in terms of what data fields you have. So the data fields you can have for 1030, 530, and 830. First one is called time to go, and that's nested under the workouts category when you're building out this custom field. And now that one will show you how much time you have left in the interval. So that way, to answer your question directly, Alex, that way it's counting down. That's familiar for people that are used to TrainerRoad, right? You can also count up, and we'll cover how to do that in the different head units in just a bit. Then you also have one called target, and that target data field is within also the workouts category. And that will actually give you a range. So we'll prescribe a target, but then it will give you a range for that target. And that's something, Pete, you mentioned that you always try to stick to. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I think that's something everybody should stick to, is trying to hit a specific, like 242 for your 16-minute interval. Is you're just heaping undue stress on yourself to you're going to end up pedaling too hard at the end to get that exact number, because if you don't hit 242, you failed. And it's fine, Alex. It's fine. We all fail.
I hit 243 just to make sure.
Yeah, every time. But if you follow the guidelines of our ranges that we show in our outside workouts, your life is so much easier, and you also are able to kind of deal with the curveballs that riding outside gives you. Which happens to me more often than I would guess, even on my very curated outside workout rides that I know everything that's going to happen. There's the mailman pulls out, or there's a school zone, it just never nothing that changes that. So when I give myself the 10 watts or the 15 or 20 watts, depending on the power target, your life is much better. And then you try to I always shoot for the middle and then try to bring it up a little bit at the end, rather than overshooting right from the gun. Go ahead, John.
Sorry, Pete. I was going to say one big thing with this is people say, should I try to drag my average up or down, or should I just try to focus on the power target? And the answer is just focus on the power target, because the time at intensity is what we're going for. So let's just say for some reason you do have to stop and it drags your average really far down. So then for the rest of that interval, instead of sending it in sweet spot, you spend it in VO2 because you're trying to drag it up. That defeats the purpose of that interval, right? The taking the rest and taking the break is one thing. That's fine. Just get back into it and try to hold that target. So that's why it's really important to have your target power and then to see what you're actually doing. Also, you'll see your lap power that you can track as well. So, and one thing to reinforce with this is target. Once again, this is a unique data field to 10:30, 5:30, and 8:30. And target is within that workouts category. And that's the one that's going to give you a range. So that's important. And it will become important once you get into the other head units in just a sec. Then you can have your smooth power to whichever smoothing you want, whether that's 3, 5, 10, whatever, or 1. It's Alex holding up 1. And then you can also have one on the, once again, 10:30, 8:30, 5:30 workout comparison. And this is cool because it actually shows a graphical representation of your workout. So you can see the graph down below, and it will zoom in on the interval and you'll be able to see how your power is tracking. So really familiar for people that are using TrainerRoad. And then we'd also recommend, if you're trying to replicate that, you can have heart rate and cadence, right? So what it looks like is a pretty simple data field. Actually, it's time to go at the top, and then you'll have your target thereafter. Then you'll have your actual power at the moment, and then you'll have the graph of the workout. Then down below, you have 2 little spots for your heart rate and cadence. So that's on the 10:30, 8:30, and 5:30. Now, if you don't have those head units, then there are different targets that you can use. What Alex is talking about, this one, so this is still under the workouts category. If you have an even older head unit, I believe that there's one called interval time, but I could be totally wrong, but there's something similar to that. And that one will count up. So you have 2 different options that you can use there. Then on head units that aren't the 30 series ones, you have a data field called target power. And that's within the indoor training. And that will actually give you a specific power target. It won't give you a range. So basically, when we give you ranges, it splits the difference and gives you the middle of all of that. So then that way you can have something, but still know that you have a range to be able to work with. And then it's the same after that of your current power, smooth to whatever you want, and then your heart rate and cadence. So that's how you do it on Garmin. I'm sure that is terrible to listen to and to think through if you're just listening to the podcast. So I apologize, but you can once again click that link and check it out and set up your Garmin this way. It's really helpful to be able to do that. And then one other, just a couple of pro tips with Garmin's, especially 8:30 or 10:30, 8:30, 5:30. If you swipe back to that Garmin screen and then swipe up, lots of swiping to do when you're cross-eyed in an interval. But if you do that, you can see where you're at in relation to the whole workout. Like you can see the whole workout graph and it'll show you how you're progressing through it. And there's also a previous, a pause, and a next button. So you can pause the current interval and then you can hit previous or next. But you can also just stop your head unit anytime that you need to. So if you have a stoplight, if you have something that requires you to be a safe rider and not continue at your power target, you can always just hit that stop button. And then you can just hit start back to it and hit start once it's safe to continue doing so. So don't worry. You don't have to my interval started and you can't be like, hold on vehicles. I need to don't do that. Let your workout adjust around that sort of thing. So that's the Garmin thing and how you can do it. And I know Wahoo has an even easier way to skip back and forward, right, Pete?
It does. And I'm going to add one thing to your stoplight or pausing and getting extra time. If you know the route you're doing and you know that it's going to be pretty hairy for the next 5 minutes, just add an extra 5 minutes of rest right now, pause it, get to where you need to go so that the rest of your workout is as prescribed. I promise that's a way better way to utilize your time, and you're going to kind of maximize your actual workout like you want it to be, rather than pausing multiple times, like worrying about the cars, stressing yourself out, trying to sprint away from stop signs. None of this ever works where if you just say, it's okay, in 5 minutes, I'm going to continue the next 45 minutes of my workout. I'm going to do it as prescribed. And I do that probably half the time. I mean, I probably wiggle around in the workout half the time I go outside. And that's with picking very specific open-ended places where I know that the workouts are going to jive with the terrain I'm on. So it's like an exercise in flexibility and unwinding yourself into from the graph right beneath you.
Yes.
But yeah, we can talk about Wahoo. Actually, Wahoo's pretty straightforward. one of the things you're going to have to do, and I with Garmin as well, is you do have to actually sync your Garmin account and your Wahoo account with TrainerRoad to make sure that that's actually pushing things across. And with Wahoo specifically, you pull down to kind of refresh any workouts that would be pushed to your head unit, and you have to be connected to the internet. A couple of those things really make a difference because you won't see your workouts if you don't do that. But one of the nice things is once it's in there, the Wahoo workout screen is pretty good. And it shows your target range, just like John was saying, with a range on both ends of the target power, your 3-second average, your interval time, like your elapsed interval, specific interval time, which interval you're on out of the number of intervals, your total remaining workout time, and your speed, and a graph at the bottom. And so part of the way that Wahoo does it is you can't take some of the specific workout page screens like you can on Garmin and add it to another page. So what I'd kind of do is I've done this both on the Roam and the Bolt, where I take kind of a complementary screen and I make it the following screen. So you get your the normal screen you generally use when you're riding, and then as you page through, you'll get to the workout screen, and then directly after that, I'll put more complementary information that I would want out of the workout screen, and then usually I just flop back and forth between the two. And so for me, that's 3-second average power, lap time, and usually heart rate and speed. I try to go fast when I do my intervals because that's generally what I'm trying to do.
When you race, right? Yeah.
Right. So higher speed, paying attention to where I'm putting down power, how fast I'm going, stuff like that. But I really try to focus specifically on each interval rather than the total workout. So I don't look at the total intervals remaining and the total workout time remaining. I always just try to focus on nailing this one specific 6 minutes, and that's the important part. And then you get to the rest, and then you do it again. And so kind of the way I've always found it to work the best is I start the interval with the workout page, wrap my head around what I'm trying to do, and then swap over to just the metrics that I care about for the next 5 minutes. And since I know how long the workout is or the interval is, pay attention. And then as I'm getting to the end, I swap back, make sure I nailed it, and then rest and do it again.
Yeah. That's a walkthrough on the Wahoo side, the Garmin side. Let's get into some of the execution stuff. We already talked about safety. We already talked about, making sure that you're tying and you're just looking at the power and then, glancing at that every once in a while instead of on it. But terrain matching, let's talk about that. So it really depends on the workout. So I have different areas that I will pair with specific types of workouts in our region. And also for those that are listening to this, for everybody, you may not have ideal terrain to do your outside workouts in. And that's just kind of the way it is. So I have like somebody reached out to me the other day and they were like, hey, I'm in an extremely hilly town. They were from over in Spain, extremely hilly town. We can't get anything that's, all of our stuff are 1 to 3 minute climbs and there's no such thing as a flat road. That's going to be really hard to do like TT training on, right? Because it's just, you'll constantly be chasing a power target. And chances are if you go and do a TT, it's probably not going to be in that sort of circumstance. So that is hard. If you live in an urban area and it takes you a long time to get out of it, it's tough. So first of all, that may be the reality you're faced with. So with that in mind, grain of salt handy, I want to talk about how I pair a few things. So if I have short repeating intervals, but they have rest between intervals, I can do that in 2 different places. I look for something that's flat and straight and simple, because that's probably the most versatile terrain that you can deal with, right? Or I look for something that has a climb that I'm able to either repeat or a climb that's long enough that I'm able to do that whole set in. So I'll look at that set, and if that set is going to take me 15 minutes and I look at a climb and I know that, okay, if I went up that climb full gas and it took me 15 minutes, I'll definitely be okay if I'm just doing 30/30s up this thing, for example, right? You can also do the turnaround. So don't feel like you have to pedal in between intervals when you have like an on and then an off. Alex is known for making sure he's pedaling between those intervals because he wants to get the extra credit and raise the tide, so to speak, get more for what he's doing. But you don't have to. So if you're going up a climb and you only have like a 1 minute climb in your area, and that's the one that you have to use, just repeat it, right? You'd go up and then you coast down. And also, yes, the closer you can adhere to your rest targets, the better. Sure. But if you go 5 seconds under, 5 seconds over, 10, whatever it is, it's not the end of the world. You're still doing the work. And that's the important part. Like Pete said, the wiggle room is there and it's okay to use it. If you have short repeating intervals, but there's work between the intervals, that's where turnarounds start to be really tough. This is where you'll want something that is more consistent. So that's going to be a longer stretch of road that's flat and or a climb. Yes, it is easy and feels easier to do higher power on climbs for a lot of people because of the lower inertia. You have like I guess more force per degree of that whole pedal stroke that you're applying. And it just feels a little bit easier for us. So that might be a case where you want to work that in. And then sustained intervals, I do think that you want to keep in mind the context. So since I'm mountain biking is my main goal, I don't try to do a lot of my work on flat terrain. I try to do it on climbing terrain because if I get really good at when I'm geared out on my road bike on a flat road and I'm doing fast intervals that way, that's great. But it feels really different when I'm on a mountain bike and it's a steep climb. So as far as climbs versus flats or whatever else, context reigns supreme for whatever you're going to be doing for racing. Would you say so as well, Ivy?
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said for doing intervals in that kind of context. And there's maybe a stigma or people aren't necessarily excited about the idea of doing a ride that's like 5 miles from their house. And, they don't want to do that kind of ride because you just and then you get home and your family's like, where'd you ride? And I'm like, down the street, and
once again, I feel attacked. This is my entire riding experience.
So, I think there are ways to keep those kinds of rides interesting and engaging. And the way that I like to do that is add an extended cool down loop somewhere scenic and nice after you do those repeats in a kind of boring area. And I think that there are some of us that are a little robotronic that don't mind just having a super controlled, interval ride and being able to do that work, some of us or time crunch people that only have an hour to ride. And that's really good for them that they want to just go do those efforts and turn around and go home. But, I think there are other ways to keep those kinds of structured rides interesting by adding an extended cool down or an extended warm up, going somewhere scenic, ice cream stop after your interval ride. It doesn't have to just be go do the work and turn around.
Yeah.
I'm for the ice cream stop. I've done that plenty of times.
Alex, you and I have talked about our ideal is when we can do something where it's you go up a fire road and then you descend a single track, right? In between the intervals. To your point, Ivy, just because there's a convenience level and you can do it one way, it doesn't mean that you can't think of ways to make it even better, right? You can find other ways for sure. One thing that I think is important to talk about too, Pete, you mentioned this, a lot of people think of inside versus outside, they're at opposing odds with each other, but we shouldn't think of it that way, right?
Yeah. And it's been something we talk about a lot, right? It's more structure is generally what makes you faster. And that's what we believe. And so getting people to find ways that structure works for them is the most important part. It doesn't matter whether it's inside or outside. It matters that you can find something that you can execute consistently. And that's when you're going to get the most bang for the buck. And for some people that's inside, for some people that's outside. For a lot of us, it's a mix of both. It's something that, I think we said, it's just another tool to use in your toolbox of training. And that's a great way to think about it, where it's something you can opt for. And a lot of the times it'll be 3:30 on a Thursday afternoon. And I'm like, it's just too nice. I'm just going to swap to an outside workout and go outside. And that's all there is to it. It's just nice having that in your back pocket as something you can do whenever the wind takes you, I guess.
Yeah. Alex, I'm sure when you first started training with power that you experienced the same thing that a lot of people experience in terms of power was all over the place, right? Does it get better with time? And do you have any tips with that?
Yeah, I think it absolutely gets better with time. It's actually, and nothing against people who use smoothing, it's part of the reason that I don't, is I feel like if you put smoothing on your computer, then you don't smooth yourself in a way. So I feel like it made me better at adhering to power. And then I think Ivy mentioned it. There's a learning curve for her with smoothing, and now I'm just stuck in my ways and don't want to go through that learning curve. So 1 second average it is. I think it's just time. And then I think understanding, we say it a lot, but that you're training energy systems and not necessarily this specific number. So it's like as like specific as 242 watts sounds, really the goal of it was like, depending on where you are. For me, it's like, that's just middle of zone 2 is pretty much what they're trying to get after. So trying to understand it in the grander scheme of things, and also giving yourself ranges too. One thing I wanted to add there is I would always make that range down. Like, I feel like sometimes you're like especially for like a VO2 interval, you're trying to push the upper end of VO2. So if you give yourself a range up, then you're tiptoeing into anaerobic, which can have negative consequences. So try to give yourself like 10 watts the other direction and kind of just play in that zone and not be so tied around that like perfect 242 or whatever it is. And I think just like now I could ride zone 2 without even looking at my power meter. And I bet you I could do it between 240 and 250 watts every day.
Mm-hmm. You just
I
tie in.
I think it's just time. And I think Ivy mentioned this, but it's super important to like check in with the effort. I feel like so much of the time you have the endorphins of hitting power numbers, and you might have music in and you're jamming, like you have all these things, but don't forget to check in and be okay. Like, whoa, this hurts, or this is painful and hard, but wow, I can do it 6 times. It's an important thing to have in a race when you're like, I'm just tapped. And it's like, no, well, in training, I felt this way before, and then I can do it for another 6 times. So it's important to check in with what that effort feels like, because, you know, with the exception of a few courses, like we've talked about with nationals, you can't really ride a course to power. You have what you have and you race based on feel. So just kind of understanding what different zones and efforts feel like, and then also what your body's capable of. It's cool to see like you're on the ropes and then give yourself 2 minutes of recovery and you're ready to do it again. So it's kind of like thinking about that in a race, like, oh man, I'm smoked to the top of this climb. Like, oh, but I get this descent, so I'll be ready to go again by the time we're climbing. So it's just trying to check in with your body and what you're capable of doing is pretty cool.
Something else to consider too, ambient conditions can be a motivation for you to ride inside or outside, depending on what you are used to or what you're preparing for. If you are going to, you know, like last week's episode with Sophia and Russell, they were going to Puerto Rico. So they were like, probably not going to be riding outside in freezing cold. It would have been better, if anything, for them to ride inside and create a hot environment, right? But if you're riding outside, emulates what you're going to experience, and every time you ride inside, it's nice and cold, then, you know, you want to change that. So take that into consideration. Another thing too is there's a learning curve with this. It's a unique type of cognitive load when you're riding outside and you're trying to hold that power, and you're dealing with wind gusts and changing road surfaces, possibly traffic, changing pitch. It's a different type of cognitive load than what you're used to when you go inside. So if you are familiar with going inside and you're like, wow, I just don't seem to be able to hit the power numbers right when you start out because you're getting used to it, you might experience the same thing when you take things outside as well. So just keep that in mind. And then sometimes, you know, certain workouts are just going to be, you know, some of them are impossible. Some of them are going to be really hard. That's just the way it works. And the more complex the structure is, the more simple your terrain has to be, or the more allowing your terrain has to be, right? So usually they're going to be more difficult. Or like if you're riding threshold and you're doing it for extended periods of time, like you have like 30-minute threshold intervals, everybody knows that if you're riding 30 minutes over threshold and you have to spike like 5 minutes or 5 watts above your threshold for 20 seconds, that has a severe impact, right? So you have to keep that in mind. It might be tougher to do work like that when you're outside. And sustained work in general is just going to be more difficult the longer it gets, and like more precise it needs to be, or higher intensity it needs to be when you're riding outside. So some pro tips with this: using a gravel, this is Alex, you and I do this all the time. Using a gravel bike or a mountain bike can be helpful if you're terrain constrained, because you travel over that terrain slower when you have big knobby tires. So you get more time out of the same distance of road. So pro tip, if you are limited on that, that can be a really helpful thing. So another thing too, if you are finding that your power is bouncing all over the place and you just can't keep track of it yet, once again, you'll get used to it, but try to increase your power smoothing duration. A couple other things too. New construction neighborhoods, if you live in such an area that has those, they can be great if they've built the roads and then there aren't like construction crews in that part of that new neighborhood. They can be really good because it can either be flat and it can be like a safe 4-corner crit, and you can just do laps on that forever, or it could be one with hills. There's tons of options.
We get a lot of questions too about like safe, controlled ways to practice like cornering at speed. People are anxious about getting back into racing and they're like, I haven't taken a corner at speed in like a year. So if you feel that's a good addition, if you feel like there's a new construction area, or sometimes like business parks that are not active on weekends, like those kinds of settings where you can like see all the way through the corner and you feel like it's safe and controlled. Good places to also practice cornering at speed. For sure. And then this last one too, in the end, you're just trying to get the time and intensity, right? Like you're focusing on the work. So if your TSS is a bit different, it doesn't matter, right? Ivy, like if it took you longer to get to where you need to start your workout and you have like a commute, so to speak, to get to the point where you can the good roads for training, it doesn't ruin your workout if that's longer or shorter, or if it takes you a long time to go back. Yeah, I think that there's a pretty heavy misconception that when you're doing an outside workout, you need to adhere really very strictly to A, the warm up and cool down, and then B, to just the overall TSS. And really that's not the case. You should obviously keep it within like a general sliding scale. But the most important thing is those efforts and the recovery between them. And then after that, adding, if you have to take a little extra to ride to and from your interval spot. I know a lot of people that live in cities and urban areas struggle with that a lot. Like it's okay as long as you're staying within the general zones of recovery in your warm up. Focus on the intervals and not that overall TSS. Yep. Yeah, Alex.
I was just going to add a couple of things. On the mountain bike thing and adding fun to Ivy's point, I've done many times where you're like, the structured part is 2 hours or an hour and a half. If you end that at the top of a trail and you're doing your intervals on a mountain bike, then you can take the trail home. So that's kind of like your reward, like, I did it. If there's no ice cream shop at the top, then that'll do. And then
that's the next big idea in cycling. Ice cream shops at the end at all trailheads. I'm all for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then going back to Garmin setup, I just wanted to mention doing the workout within Garmin turns off the auto pause. So if you have auto pause on, it won't auto pause. So I found that out the hard way the first time I did mine, and my OCD went a little nuts. So there's that. And then I was just going to offer, I'll post up what my training screens are on my Garmin 1030, which is what I do all my intervals on my Instagram stories, and I'll archive it or whatever saves it to my page. So if anybody wants to check that out, then I can just share the ones I use. I have like an everyday one, I have an interval one, and then I have what I call bonus features, which is like climbing or calories or just like fun facts that I want to know about the ride.
Max power, obviously.
Yeah. So it's really all that matters. Just put that up there for every workout.
That doesn't need a very big screen for mine. Make it say 4 digits.
Yeah, exactly.
If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up.
If you didn't like this video, you can give it a thumbs down, but let us know what you would have done differently in the comments below.
If you want to see more of these videos, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, check out TrainerRoad.com.
Do it.
If you think I have better hair than Jonathan, give it a thumbs up. If not, leave a comment.
My hair is better than his.